Hello and welcome to the review. On this week's Webisode, we concentrate on your feedback on the Charlie Hebdo coverage here at Al Jazeera. We'll be talking to the head of news output and answering some of your questions. But before we get into that, let's take a quick look back at the past week and the stories that have been making the headlines.
Security sources say the two suspects in the Charlie Hebdo shooting were killed in the operation. Their single hostage has been released unharmed.
Thousands of supporters greeted Sri Lanka's new leader, Maithripala Sirisena, at his inauguration in the capital, Colombo.
A long-simmering political stalemate has reached a boiling point.
January 12th is the deadline for a political deal to be reached. If not, Parliament will be dissolved and President Michel Martelly could then rule by decree.
Leaders from more than 40 countries stood shoulder to shoulder with the French president. On this day, the president said, Paris is the capital of the world.
The FBI says it's looking for the culprits who hacked two of the Pentagon's key social media websites on Monday. Attackers claiming to be loyal to ISIL took over the Twitter feed for CENTCOM, or U.S. Central Command.
The attack happened at around 2:15 in the afternoon. The bright yellow civilian bus was approaching a Ukrainian-held checkpoint near the town of Volnovakha, some 35 kilometers south of Donetsk. It's the biggest single loss of civilian life since the ceasefire agreement of September last year.
So a few days ago, we asked what you thought of our coverage of the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris. Here's what you had to say. Piero Palladou wrote on Google+, "Your Charlie Hebdo coverage made me, a regular admiring viewer, cringe at times because of unusual utterances of but narratives such as human life and freedoms are sacred, but AJE's fineness and strength lie in your commitment and capability to reflect and explain our complex world by multiplying the uses of and." On Twitter, Sadmo3752 wrote, "We experience more brutal attacks in Africa almost on a daily basis. Why doesn't it get half of the coverage as Charlie Hebdo?" Many other viewers repeated similar concerns. We'll ask the head of news output about that in a minute. But first, on the reVIEW website, Ghasana Jean commented, "I, for one, hope Al Jazeera will continue to stick to its balanced reporting on this ongoing issue." But on Facebook, Carl Jared wrote, "Looking at Al Jazeera's coverage of the last few days, it is all about so-called Islamophobia." All very interesting questions and comments you guys have been sending in. So let's talk more about some of those issues with head of news output, Carlos Van Meek. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today. Our first question was from Muhammad Asif Nasri on Facebook, and he asks, can you please define freedom of speech?
Freedom of speech is self-evident, isn't it? It's the freedom to say or print things that you think are needed to be said. So we believe as a news organization in the freedom of speech. And we believe in other news organizations to defend that right of their own. But we also have a code of ethics. And there are certain things we will not put to air, we will not put on our website, because they may offend a certain community. With freedom of speech comes tremendous responsibility, and we take that responsibility very seriously.
Now, Carl Jared on Facebook says, Al Jazeera promotes Islamism and is an apologist for terrorism. So I guess many commenters have been using the word apologist lately. What do you make of this?
We're not apologists for anyone. We work very hard at trying to get all points of view out there. And I would say that I would welcome them to watch more of what we do and not just throw slogans out there like that, because I don't find them accurate whatsoever.
And on Twitter, Rich2Mav tweeted at us, "Where is the live coverage, AJE? The silence is very loud. Africa weeps. Hashtag Nigeria 2000.
I'd say to those, they might have a point. It just got taken over by events, and it's something that we addressed here very, very seriously. We realized that there needed to be a rebalancing of editorial priorities. And I think you saw that happen late Friday into Saturday when we started really getting into the Nigeria story good and proper. I take that on board. I think there are times where news organizations can get caught up in a story and other stories fall by the wayside. And our job is to always constantly recalibrate our editorial priorities and do the best we can to tell the stories that need to be told.
Head of News Output, Carlos Van Meek, thank you so much. All very good points.
You're very welcome.
We had many interesting and varied programs on the channel this past week, but with the news out of Paris, one show in particular attracted hits and comments. Our media analysis magazine based in London, The Listening Post, hosted by Richard Gisbert. Here's a quick clip.
Will publish their magazine next week on schedule.
It was a ready-made meme. Je suis Charlie. I am Charlie. We are all Charlie. Journalists clicked that message of solidarity, and it traveled fast. But what were they expressing solidarity with, exactly? Because, as one writer put it, as the headlines screamed of attacks on freedom, to abhor what was done to the victims is not the same as to become them.
Among the many comments on the program was this from Sondra C. on YouTube. Gonna have to say that I didn't find this reportage to fit your standard of impartialness, Al Jazeera. Well, we had a chance to Skype with Richard earlier. We asked, what's the show's standard for impartiality?
When you're looking at journalism, you've got a perspective and you've got a bias. I think we've seen a lot of that bias in the reflexive Je suis Charlie meme that was flying around, used by journalists who would never publish the kind of material that Charlie Hebdo did publish, but who want to sign on as part of the campaign. I think that's reflective and journalistic. And our approach to stories like this fails to take into account, as it should, who it is that we're working for. And we try to look at the story.
One Facebook commenter, Peter T99, wrote, "Wow, so one-sided reporting. Most journalists and philosophers supported Charlie, yet this report didn't portray any of them."
I think whenever one provides a different perspective to the one that is considered dominant, as the Je suis Charlie freedom of expression is everything narrative was, then people come at you and they say it's one-sided. Well, how can you say that a piece that states categorically twice that regardless of the crimes against satire or journalism that I think Charlie Hebdo committed, there can be no justification for a murderous hail of gunfire within a magazine?
Other viewers commented on Listening Post's decision to include an item on Al Jazeera's imprisoned journalists in Egypt in the same show. On YouTube, this commenter wrote, "How can you be critical of Charlie Hebdo, stating that they're racist, yet feel for your reporters in Egypt? Oh, now that's a miscarriage of justice." Here's what Richard had to say on that.
There's a huge difference between what Charlie Hebdo does as a satirical magazine and what Al Jazeera did in Egypt as a news organization. Charlie Hebdo flat out says that it is their mission to offend. Al Jazeera's mission is to inform. If you want to take issue with the ways that Al Jazeera has approached stories, its journalistic approach, then feel free to. But grouping Al Jazeera in the same area as a Charlie Hebdo, for me, negates in many ways the validity of the question.
Thanks for all the questions and comments you guys sent in. Next week, we'll be speaking to the director of a new documentary that tells the stories of Somali refugees in Yemen and the obstacles they face. Here's a quick preview.
Taiz, on the southern coast of Yemen. A small boat has arrived on the beach, carrying a group of Somali refugees. Exhausted, hungry, and dehydrated, They need medical treatment after an arduous journey.
That's all the time we've got for this week. We always look forward to hearing from you, so keep those comments coming, and don't forget that next time you could be on The Review.